Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 5, part 5 of our September webinar series, all about getting ahead of your China numbers. One of the key reasons I was formulating this webinar series this month was because we're heading up towards the end of the fiscal year, and it's extremely important to get oversight on what your numbers look like and what you still need to achieve in Q4 2021. One of the biggest problems that we've seen in the last couple of months, particularly for those that are newly incorporating their companies, is around the operation of the bank account and how to actually operate that bank account from abroad, considering you can't go into China and the borders are shut. So we're going to get started on that. Again, as people are slowly filtering in, it's always good for me to know who the audience is. So if you would be so kind, and even if you're watching this on replay up on the YouTube channel, just type in the comments or in the chat box, are you a newbie, are you a startup, or are you an experienced hand in China? Again, this is just great insight for me, and it starts to have a little bit of interaction as we progress in our webinars. How the webinar works is I'm here to educate you. I'm here to teach you today about how to open up corporate bank accounts, what type of banks exist, what type of accounts exist, and how to actually physically maneuver the bank accounts. And I'm going to use myself as a case study, considering I'm not in China at the moment in terms of how we operate. Again, if you've got any questions, ask away. This is the opportunity for you to get your questions answered. We are using Zoom meeting, so please know that if you run into any technical issues, my only suggestion is log off, log back in. We are recording today's session, so the recording will be up on the YouTube channel by the end of today. If I run into any difficulties, which so far has not happened this week, but if it does, it usually takes about a minute to reboot the whole system, and I will be coming back on. If it does take a little bit longer than that, I apologize up front, but just know I will be coming back on to finish the presentation. And if you have time restrictions, I completely understand. Again, just know we've got the recording and a link will be sent out by email as well. Who am I? And for those of you that have been on here the whole week, apologies for this, but it's part of the YouTube game. I've got to introduce myself for all of the webinars. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I'm a leading expert on inbound investment into China. What that means is that 100% of my clients are foreign investors looking to invest in the Hong Kong and Chinese markets. I'm 17 years in Shanghai, apart from the year and a half just now in Europe due to the pandemic. And what we do is all of the administrative functions that need to take place in order to keep companies in compliance and in good standing in both Hong Kong and China. We have helped over 500 international companies with their startups in China, with their implementations in China, and ultimately with their growth and their scaling up in the Chinese market. One of the positive outcomes over the last 17 years in China has been the fact that a lot of things can actually be systemized. I have gone through 17 years of roadblocks and obstacles and made my mistakes, just similar to any of the old timers and experienced China hands that might be out there. I've realized that a lot of the things that could have stopped me from reaching these roadblocks is the fact that we can systemize a lot of aspects now in China. It's not just chaos and sporadic behavior. Things are actually step-by-step procedures. So I've created certain methodologies surrounding that to prevent people from making the same mistakes that I made and others have made in their startup periods in China. All of these webinars are up on the YouTube channel, and we're going to be doing another session of those in December as well before we hit the Christmas break to just refresh people's minds as they start their businesses in 2022. So do stay tuned for that. And last but not least, just before I start off today's presentation, I haven't mentioned it this week, but I did write a book. It's called The 9 Superpowers to Succeed in China. And it provides you with a lot of the tools that I talk about in my webinars in regards to protecting your business and making sure you don't hit those roadblocks, you don't hit those obstacles, and you create action plans and systemized processes or SOPs to make sure you're entering the China market properly and with a solid and sound foundation. The book can be found on Amazon, on any of the Amazon channels, so feel free to get a Kindle or hard copy version of that if you wish. So to start off with part 5 today, we're looking at, do you have the capabilities of operating your China bank account? And ultimately, the question surrounding that is, do you have the capabilities of operating your account from abroad? And I'm going to talk about a couple of new things that have popped up in the last 3 months since opening up accounts for my clients. What are the new things that are coming up? What are the things that you have to watch out for in the future operations? And then ultimately just some tips and action plans on, what can you do from abroad, which is a lot, I just want to tell you, because I'm doing it. So let's get cracking. What we're covering today is all things bank account. So choosing your banking partner, banking structure, the types of accounts, payment options, foreign exchange controls, and then the conclusion will be the actual action plans and tips of actually operating the accounts. So I'm going to start from the beginning, and I completely understand that some people that are on here live and those that might be watching the replay are at different stages, but I just wanted to explain if you are incorporating your company, what does it mean to open up your bank account fresh, okay? So my philosophy is this: no corporate service provider or lawyer should be choosing a bank for you. They should be only offering you recommendations based predominantly on their own experiences of who are the good banks to work with and who are the rubbish banks to work with. And these providers should be giving you options, but also the advantages and disadvantages of the various banks, okay? And trust me, there are advantages and disadvantages to every single bank, okay? Prior to even starting the incorporation, you should have an understanding of what it takes to open up the account. So having an introductory call, kind of like doing a test call with the variety of banks or options you've been provided with, and hopefully you have 2, 3, 4 of them, you start asking questions. And I've actually developed an agenda for these calls for my clients so that they have a clear guide on what to be asking and what should be the takeaway from those calls, right? So you should be doing that research, talking to 3 to 4 banks locally in the city that you're looking to operate in to understand language levels, to understand what services can they offer you, understanding what services do you need from them, and then ultimately knowing how to operate the bank, and then finally, what are the incorporation documents? What is the document list to actually open up the accounts? Now, again, the reason why I say do these calls is because you should be the one choosing your bank. Nobody else should be making that choice for you. And you can terminate a lawyer, you can terminate a corporate service provider, you can terminate your accountant at any point in time, which leaves you to manage your bank by yourself. So you should be managing that discussion up front on your own. Now, once you've got that and you kind of have filtered it and say, okay, I've got this one bank I'm keen on, or I have these two top banks, and as we get closer, I'll make a decision. At that point, absolutely fine. But at least you know, and you filtered and you've got a priority list of who you'd like to work with. Once the business license is issued, usually your agent or incorporation agent, whether that's the lawyer or whomever, they will go ahead and advise the bank that the business license has been issued so that they can start their due diligence on the shareholder. Now, currently, or let me backtrack, during the pandemic, the due diligence process with the banks was going very smooth and very fast, whereby we were really getting things processed, everything from start to finish within 25 to 30 working days. Currently, as I believe there is more investment that's going into the market, there's a bit of a backlog at the various banks in terms of their due diligence processes. And so it's taking longer. So I want people to keep that in mind. It's no fault of the corporate service providers. This is the due diligence that the banks have to make on who the ultimate beneficial owners are of the China subsidiary. Okay, so be prepared that those compliance procedures may hold up the establishment of the company. Now, when you are when you are in the phase of incorporating the accounts, one thing you need to be aware of is that there are some cities where the banks are required by the local regulations to only accept face-to-face visits. Shenzhen is such a place where you are required to physically go and meet the bank for an hour to open up the account. So as you can imagine, in a place like Shenzhen, there is much less foreign investment being established unless the company has a loophole where they have somebody locally based who can hold the role of legal rep to open the account. All right. In other cities like Shanghai, you have the ability to organize a Zoom conference call with the bank and the legal representative who ultimately shows the original passport. Or if there's no Zoom conference call, it is a video that has to be made by the legal rep holding his passport and reading a certain text to actually open the bank account. Okay. It is important to note that original passports of the legal rep do need to be sent over to China. There is no exception in regards to this. So you have to be prepared that the legal rep either physically travels, goes through 14 days of quarantine, or goes through the process of by DHL or FedEx, couriering the original passport that can then be shown at the bank, received again within an hour, and sent back. In regards to point 5, it's important to note that the People's Bank of China also now requires to physically visit the office, the registered office address of the company. And they will be checking that it is a real space versus a virtual space. Okay, and they will be taking photos and it will be part of their due diligence process. Now, in theory, the banks will tell you that the account opening process for the capital account and the renminbi basic account will take between 25 to 30 working days. I am telling you today, the due diligence process is taking longer than that. Now, once that's done, you've got your account numbers, but then you need to do the application for the online banking, okay? And that in itself can take anywhere between 5 to 10 working days to get your key tokens and to download and to know how to download the software on your computer. We work with Icbc, and for us, one of the things you have to realize is you've got to download an old version of Explorer in order to be able to gain access to the Icbc platform, all right? But once you have the ability to get your key tokens and download the software system, actually, I work on my clients' accounts. So I'm working with Icbc, Merchants Bank, and Bank of Shanghai at the moment, and all three are pretty good. I can't really complain. Once everything is actually initially set up, it's pretty straightforward in terms of how to use them. You just have to make sure you've got your key token available. And also to keep in mind that the online banking platforms predominantly are in bilingual formats, making it easy for someone like me who doesn't read Chinese characters to be able to log in and be able to do what needs to get done in terms of authorizations. Once that's done, the capital can be remitted from the shareholder into the capital account in the currency that has been designated for the registered capital. All right. A lot of this is leading up to the decisions that were made as you were incorporating your company. All right. Now, what is a bit of a pain is the fact that once the capital has initially arrived, you need to show proof of upcoming payments, i.e. expenses that need to be settled. You need to show proof of those payments. So for example, if it's office rent, you need the contract of the lease together with the invoice. If it's salaries, you need the breakdown of the payroll together with the employment contracts. If you are paying a supplier, you need the purchase order together with the invoice or the FAPIAO, etc. So you need to show proof to the bank. The bank will then remit it from the capital account to the renminbi account and it will be transferred out. This doesn't have to happen forever. The bank is doing this as an initiation, so to speak, to make sure that the expenses that you have are true and valid, and that you have the supporting documentation to make those transfers. Okay. Usually after 2, 3, 4 months, depends on the bank really, and depends on your bank officer. And depends also on how often you do these transfers and whether they are recurring. You will be able to then fully transfer the capital from the capital account into the renminbi basic so that you can use your online banking platform to do all the payments and you don't have to show supporting documentation. Just remember, again, when choosing your bank, the account opening process should not determine your banking partner. I have too many clients who, if a bank says, oh, well, it will only take 10 working days, they're like, okay, we'll go with you. But they don't look at the vision or the partnership that is being formulated and developed with that bank. And that's where I get frustrated, because you need to know what facilities you need from your bank, and you need to make sure that the bank is going to offer you those facilities. If you're just doing it because they say it takes 10 working days, this is rubbish. Because once you've incorporated your accounts, that's the end of the story, right? So make sure you do those introduction meetings with the banks. Make sure you are asking them what facilities they can offer, what facilities do you need, what are the criteria to get those facilities, whether it's credit, whether it's getting debit cards, whatever it might be that you need to operate your organization, okay? Because this partnership will last the full validity of your organization. Why? Because when you establish your renminbi basic account, it's one account. You can't ever close that or reopen somewhere else. That renminbi basic account is stuck at that bank for life. What you can then open up are settlement accounts in other banks, but not renminbi basic accounts. And I'll explain the difference between that later on. So do your homework. How to choose your banking partner. Now, in China, there are international banks and there are Chinese banks. If you would ask me on the top of my head, Christina, what would you do? I would say go with a Chinese bank. That may surprise you, surprises many people, but I have had a bad experience myself with my own organization with an international bank. And the Chinese banks make life a lot easier because they have the capabilities of fully operating in the market. The international banks have to go through stricter processes and rules to abide by the People's Bank of China versus the Chinese banks. And it has come to a point where international banks are being selective in terms of who they will work with. Whereas a Chinese bank, you go, you open up the account, it's done. I mean, you submit the documents, they do their due diligence, and you open your account. There's no, they're not going to ask you questions like, what will be your estimated revenue over the next 3 years? Where are you doing inbound transactions or outbound transactions? I mean, these international banks go through this whole questionnaire to explain what your business plan is, to actually then tell you whether you are a viable partner for them or not. And I say viable partner because they want to make money off of you, ultimately. And if they see or feel that they won't, then, you know, they won't. Okay, so you have these options available. But what I want people to understand is they've got to analyze their own banking needs. Okay, so analyze your banking needs by understanding the nature of your business transactions. Are you focused on the domestic market? Are you going to be doing, I don't know, more than 60 to 70% of your transactions domestically? If you are, then I would go with a local Chinese bank, because the network, the convenience, the fact then that your Chinese customers who you're mainly going to be transacting with are based in China, and they will be operating with Chinese banks, right? So my suggestion, just from a transactional point of view, would be work with a local Chinese bank to facilitate those payments and make it easier, and just have that network of branches that would be available throughout the country. If your business is solely a cost center and you're relying on your head office to remit funds into China, it's called an inbound remittance, then it might be easier for you to work with an international bank, because you would, and to work with the same bank that you would be working with abroad, again, to limit banking fees, but also to facilitate and speed up the transfers, because when you do interbank transactions, it is faster. So for example, if you use HSBC in the UK, I mean, try and use HSBC in China, right? We'll just ease everything. But like I said, with the international banks, they will select you basically on the criteria I mentioned, which is the volume of business, the value of business, types of transactions you're doing, whether inbound, outbound, or domestic. If you expect that your business will require a significant loan, meaning that, and I mentioned this on Tuesday's presentation, if you are looking to get a loan from a Chinese bank, you will need to usually be 3 years, show 3 years of profitable fiscal years to be able to apply for a local loan. But if you are, again, I would do that with a local Chinese bank. So you should probably choose a Chinese bank where you plan on having history with. Okay. And if you do decide to use a smaller bank, which in many instances I do recommend, because then you do get a relationship manager, which I don't think anybody should underestimate, considering we cannot currently travel to China. And I got an absolute shock when 2 days ago, or one day, yesterday, somebody, a client of mine, their local staff said that they read a government regulation saying that travel, free travel in and out of China will only happen in 2025. Complete shock for me. Well, we need to figure out how to be able to operate these banks and have relationship managers. So from abroad, we have the ability to discuss and speak with them. Okay. Don't underestimate relationship managers, and don't make the assumption that when you work with big banks like ICBC, Bank of China, etc., that you will get that, because you won't. Location of bank is critical. You may be wondering why. I'll explain to you. All right. When you choose your registered office address, which is your operational office, so in theory, the people that are going to be operating, doing physical work for you at the bank will be in that location. Choose a bank that is close to that, because you would be surprised. You can't do everything through online banking. Any inbound to China, outbound from China payments require, I will show you because I just got my my documents in the mail, require you to fill out these types of forms and submit them in original. So because we have a lot of inbound payments coming to us from abroad, I need to sign off on these, and in order for that capital to be released into my account. So again, this is why I'm explaining how I do things to ease people's feelings, but a lot of things have to be physically submitted to the bank. Of course, now, because of the pandemic, you can courier original documents, but sometimes it's just easier to do things face to face. So having a bank branch that you've opened the account in that is close to your office is vital, because you don't want your staff to be traveling, or your outsourced provider traveling hours on end to be able to operate the account. Okay. What do foreign investors choose as a bank? Normally, this is the mindset process. The mindset process is, I want to work with an international bank. I only trust international banks. When they tell me that, I say, okay, why don't you talk to your bank, your relationship manager, I don't know, in the UK, in Germany, in the US, whether they can assist you in opening up a account for your subsidiary in China. Usually the outcome of that discussion is that the relationships managers will say, I have nothing to do with China. I've got no idea about China. I don't even know if we have a branch in China. I can't help you. Basically, they say, figure it out yourself. Okay. Which leads then to a lot of foreign investors saying, I'm so disappointed. Christina, what should I do? And that's where I kind of say, let's go with a Chinese bank. It's going to be much easier in terms of going through the bank account opening process. And again, usually my options are always referring banks that are smaller, but have relationship managers and have an international aspect to them. So a lot of banks that I refer have international divisions that are specific to foreign investors where you then get a relationship manager. Okay. One example of that would be Bank of Shanghai, that has a very close relationship because Santander Group owns a part of the bank. They share offices in Shanghai, and you get a relationship manager that speaks English. Your bank branch guy may not, but at least you'll have a relationship manager that you can communicate with that has the ability to speak. And again, really the biggest advantage of these Chinese banks is the network of branches that are available out there, and knowing that there's an ease of transfer when you do domestic transactions. Like I said, Chinese companies generally work with local banks, making it much easier and faster to get transactions processed. Now let's go into the details about the accounts. So let's talk about the account types, okay? I've listed 5 here. You're not going to get all 5. The first two and the last one is what you're going to get at the beginning. So the renminbi basic account, you can only have one account of that. And yet that's, once you open it, that's it. It's done. That's the bank you've chosen. General account is what is known as what I call the settlement accounts. That can be foreign currency accounts. It can be in the same bank as the renminbi basic, or you can choose it to be in other banks. The general accounts can be open and closed at ease. Then you've got the capital contribution account, which is the capital account, basically, where when you've got registered capital, the money flows from there into that account. On Tuesday, I was talking a lot about financing options, and one of those financing options is the foreign debt loan. The foreign debt loan needs to go into the loan account, which is a separate account that can only be opened at the point where you want to do that transfer. Keep in mind timeline, it does take, again, about 25 to 30 working days to open up the loan account. Specialized accounts are a variety of different accounts where you might have specific transactions that you want to process. And again, it's important to discuss with the banks whether they can offer these types of specialized accounts depending on the transaction. Communication with your bank is vital. If you don't tell the bank what your needs are and what you're planning on doing in terms of the types of transactions, how can they advise you on what accounts you need? I'm telling you that the 3 basic you're going to open is renminbi, general, and capital. But what happens if you need other forms of accounts? What happens if you need lines of credit? What happens if you need debit cards? I mean, the list goes on. What happens if you need a local loan, right? You need to have that discussion directly with the bank. These are the types of accounts you establish. Okay. Capital contribution account and loan account. So basically, registered capital enters the capital contribution account only. Foreign debt loan enters the loan account only. All right. Renminbi basic account, general account. Again, the renminbi basic account is generally used for your domestic trade. It's where you can also withdraw cash. It's the only account you can withdraw cash from. And it's your basic day-to-day account. The general accounts for me are your foreign currency accounts where you can open up a US dollar account, a pound sterling account, Hong Kong dollar account as you wish. And you're using that account for, again, inbound, outbound transfers, and you are managing your currency exchange locally. Okay. You can also simplify that and say, I'm not going to open general accounts. I'm just going to operate out of one renminbi basic account, which is something that we do. What we do is that when money, and I do that because my expenses are in renminbi and I need my funds in renminbi to pay off all of my expenses. So when money comes in from abroad, it goes into an escrow account. I have to submit a whole series of documents to release those funds from the escrow account into my renminbi basic account. And they use the middle exchange rate of that month to do the conversion in the foreign currency into the renminbi, sits into my renminbi account, and finish. Okay. But of course, you can also say, with your bank, you can say, I want to open up a USD account, and anytime I receive USD, it has to flow into that account. You can also do that. Then the money remains in USD, and you choose the dates of conversion if you decide to convert at all. Okay. Dividend repatriation will also be considered as part of the current accounts, the general renminbi basic accounts, as well as any profit repatriation strategies you develop. Those transactions will also flow via these renminbi basic and general accounts. Payment options. Okay, by payment options, what I'm referring to is how do you make payments? Okay, in China. So there are three ways. One is through online banking, which is the most useful. And like I said, I operate three different banks, which is China Merchants, Icbc, Bank of Shanghai. And once you've downloaded those platforms onto your website and you know how it works, it's actually really straightforward, very quick to use. And I use the English versions, which are synced with the Chinese versions. You can also do branch banking, which is to do payments face-to-face at the bank, which will have to happen for all inbound and outbound transactions. Because like I said, documents like this need to be, these are issued from the bank and they need to be submitted to the bank, okay? Together with supporting documentation around the transaction that is happening, contract, invoice, and anything else the bank may request. Tax declarations, exactly, things like that, all right? And obviously the last payment, which is very common for day-to-day transactions, is WePay and Alipay, okay? Which basically just means when you have a WeChat account, you set up your local Chinese bank account to your WeChat account so that if you do make payments from your WeChat account, it's just the money is automatically deducted from your bank account, okay? It's not that you are having a WePay account, bank account. You could also transfer, let's say, a lump sum of 10,000 RMB and you just do deductions from that as well. And then you've got the Alipay option as well. So you've got those three ways of paying things. And like I said, online banking, direct connectivity is very much for domestic transactions. Branch banking is really going to be used for the inbound and the outbound transfers. Cross-border payment considerations. Why have I listed this here? Because this is a pain in the butt, basically, what I want to say. Cross-border payments refers to inbound payments into China from abroad and outbound payments from China to abroad, okay? And I touched this on Monday's presentation. I went through all the different types of repatriation strategies, but ultimately, this is what it takes to get money out of China on a general basis when you're just looking at transactions, okay? There is a document list for the tax authorities. There's a document list for the bank. All right. And it is hefty. So to give you an example, we are service-oriented companies. Before my clients have entities in China, I need to issue an invoice to their overseas entities, which means I'm going to receive funds, an inbound transaction from abroad to my China company. How it actually works is that the money arrives in a type of bank escrow account. I get a notification from the bank saying you've received a payment. And it is extremely critical that the payment details are all in alignment. In order to release the money from that escrow account into my actual renminbi basic account, or if you wish a general account, you need to submit supporting documentation on that transaction. So for me, that's supporting documentation would be 2 service agreements with the original company CHOP on it, meaning this CHOP, and 2 copies of the invoice, again stamped with the company CHOP. Okay, plus this, which our bank is Icbc, which is, and I'll tell you the title. It's amazing that I got this on my desk. I just got it yesterday from Shanghai. It's the reporting form for receipts from abroad. So this is what it looks like. And you have to sign, I have to sign that because I'm a bank signatory, and I also have to place my CHOP on it. I do this in lump sum so that not for every single payment is it sent to me and da 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 da. I do this in lump sum to ease the pain of my staff because I'm not there on the ground right now. When you do outbound transactions, because money is leaving China, The process is a little bit heftier because you need to pay taxes first, and then you have to go to the bank. All right. And I would refer everybody to Monday's webinar about profit repatriation strategies to understand what the procedures look like for, it pertains to any overseas payment. And that webinar is already up on our YouTube channel. Okay, the documents are hefty and they all have to be submitted in original and chopped with the company chop. And then forms like this need to be completed. All right. I want to mention this because, again, one of the payment options, payment forms is branch banking and doing things face to face. Everything to do with cross-border payments is done face to face. Foreign exchange control is obviously a big issue. And I did mention this on Monday's presentation where I said that there is a lack of Forex on the ground in China. All right. But there are also very strict stipulations in China, which say that you cannot move money in and out of China freely. It is a closed, it's a closed system. And anytime you want to move money in or move money out, you have to go through these cross-border application procedures to get the funds either into your account or get them out of your account. And obviously, if you can make all of those inbound, outbound transactions in renminbi, you would be making your life a lot easier because you would be eliminating one of the steps, which is getting approval from the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. Okay. The State Administration of Foreign Exchange regulates the flow of foreign currency in and out of the country, and they set the exchange rates. Okay. So it's a floating system. And generally speaking, you can decide what rate you want to use in a specific month. We always say use the middle rate, but you can also fix the rate if you like, but it will come down to whether you run into any issues in your accounting books by doing that. All right. We actually just say use the actual rate that is being placed in that month to calculate any currency exchange you have to do so that your books are true. If you decide to fix on a rate, you might be losing or gaining depending on the month. And then there'll be fluctuations that don't really make sense in your books. So you just need to be aware of this step, which can take forever, especially if the value of the transaction is high. Okay. So to just recap on that point, don't be surprised if the provider or your supplier, your customer or whomever in China, and they're doing an outbound payment to you says, I'm really sorry, it's going to take another couple of months. It's because of all of these application procedures they have to go through with the Tax Bureau, State Administration of Foreign Exchange, and the bank. Okay. Banks are required to report all domestic to overseas cash transactions of more than 50,000 renminbi. This has gone down from 200,000 renminbi previously. So everything needs to be reported that is 50,000 renminbi plus, which, in the end of the day, it's 7,000 US dollars, not much. Banks also need to report any overseas transfers by individuals of 10,000 US dollars or more. Okay. And any transaction that is 5 million USD needs to actually be reported to the central government. These reports are not applications, but they're reports that need to be filled out at the time that the transactions are occurring. So this is a lot of work for the people that are on the ground. A lot. It's very labor intensive operating these accounts. Now, I'm saying it's labor intensive because it is labor intensive. But obviously, what is people's concern? People's concern is to have control over their money in market, right? You want to make sure that your funds are taken care of and nobody is cheating you. So one thing I want to highlight is, like I said earlier, international banks have more restrictions and more bureaucratic procedures to abide by than Chinese banks. So when you're looking operationally at all of these types of transactions that have to occur, it is easier to operate in a Chinese bank than an international bank. On the other side of the coin, international banks are going to select you. You're not going to select them. So, that might ease your pain a little bit in knowing you may just go straight ahead with a Chinese bank. My experience is that I worked with an international bank for close to 15 years. And literally overnight, I got an email, which I thought was a fake email, saying that they were going to close my account because I was a small business for them. And didn't matter length of time, didn't matter anything. I was a small business, and hence I was not of interest to them anymore. And I had 30 working days to change banks. You have to imagine, I never got a phone call. So, even with the international banks, you think you're going to get a relationship manager. I didn't even get a call. I got an email that I thought was actually fake. It's like, couldn't believe they wouldn't at least pick up the phone and tell me. Anyhow, long story short, I switched to Icbc. And I'm very, very happy with Icbc. I find the online platform much easier to use, just as a reference. But also I've had no issues with them in terms of any forms of applications. And once things have been set up, it actually becomes very, very routine. We have worked with our branch at Icbc for quite a while now. And the advantage of working with that branch is we have a contact person now who I don't want to say is a relationship manager, but is our contact where we can, instead of going face to face to the bank to do things, we can actually courier documents back and forth. And we have an actual person at the other end who's going to collect everything and is working on our account, which has made life a lot easier. Is it somebody I can talk to about financing options and all of this? No, I don't have that. If I wanted to do that, I'd have to do that with somebody else, but at least it's a contact from an operational perspective to ease things. Like I said, Bank of Shanghai gives you this opportunity that you'll have a contact at the branch where you can have the ability to courier documents back and forth or meet with them face to face. Language capabilities is probably limited to Chinese, but you will have in the head office in Shanghai a relationship manager that can answer any of your questions. If you need questions on financing, operating the online platform, whatever it might be. And I think that is invaluable, especially as we cannot be traveling on the ground. And potentially we want to set certain power of authorities, and we want to make sure that those power of authorities are being followed through and abided by, right? Choosing your bank is extremely important. And now let me explain what I'm doing. So I've been for the last 18 months not in Shanghai. What has that meant for the operation of our business, particularly in regards to the operation of the bank account? So we have 2 key tokens when we open up an account at Icbc. I have my right-hand person in Shanghai who has one of the key tokens, and I am an authorizer on the account. What that means is that she's kind of my secretary in terms of any payments have to be made. She puts it in the system, notifies me, and I will go in and make the approvals and authorize those payments. The good thing is that there's tremendous communication between the two of us. So whenever there's a payment to be made, she also knows as part of our SOP to explain what it is for, show me invoices, and we've just created a system where it makes it very easy. I get her email, I see it, it's clear, I make the payment, I reply back saying approved, done. All right. And the beauty of that is that it just gives me the ability to, whenever I see her email, I just make the payment. Previously, we were making the rule that I would make payments 2 times in a month, every 2 weeks. But ultimately, it's just we've adapted on the SOP to just say, whenever I see that email, I make the payment. And if it is an extremely urgent payment, she WeChats me and says, Christina, please go in, see my email, make that a priority today. And I do that. So again, communication is vital with your team that is on the ground, that is helping you to operate that account. Whenever we have inbound payments that are coming in, she sends me a block, which happened to arrive yesterday. She sends me a block of the bank forms, and in bulk, I sign off and chop on them. There's nothing that she can do with this that really does anything because it's for inbound. This form is for inbound payments. Okay. So, you know, it's in her mind that we need those inbound payments to pay for local expenses. So, and again, this all just flows between me and my right-hand person in Shanghai. So I do that in bulk. And anytime that there is a transfer that comes in, the notification actually goes to her because you need a Chinese mobile number, which you get an SMS then in Chinese, which is all good. I could get those as well. But quite honestly, since she's operating the account, it's better that she gets it. She gets those SMSs, sends me an email. So I've got it in filing, payment received from XYZ for XYZ amount. Please send me 2 copies service agreement, 2 copies invoice. I have to do that because I maintain my shop. I will not let anybody else handle that. And the original CHOP needs to be put on copies of service agreements and invoices. So there we do have the SOP that every 2 weeks, it's in my agenda. I do all the printing out for all these transactions that have popped in. And I send 2 couriers out in a month to lower again the courier costs, so that we're not overspending on courier costs. So I don't do a courier for just one transaction. I do it for whatever has popped in that 2-week time frame. Send it to her. She then checks it, couriers those to the bank. And at that point, the bank needs about 3 to 5 working days to review. And they will then release those funds based on the documents I've submitted into the account. So it's not exactly perfect because if I was in Shanghai, payment was received, then within a day we could release those funds. It's not going to happen. With the fact that I'm here, I'm okay with it because when I know that the funds are in the escrow account, I know the funds are on the ground. That's how we operate. When we then do overseas transactions, again, there are forms that have to be completed. I prefer that I do that per transaction. We don't have so many, maybe once every quarter. So in that regard, I fill out the form at the same time, but she couriers me a bulk. So I have got the bulk with me. I fill out the form at the point of when we're going to do an outbound payment, provide then also the agreements, the invoices with the new CHOPs and any other documents that would be required, send it to her. She then goes to the bank to do the application and it's then posted out. Does it take time? Yes, it is administrative. If I was in Shanghai, I'd have my PA doing all of that, putting it on my desk and me signing off on it. That's not where we are today with the pandemic. I just want people to know that it is feasible for you to have control over your account and to create SOPs that will make it efficient for you to operate the account. Okay. And when you're doing trade transactions, it's very similar to the service transactions, although you may have to provide purchase orders and it could be that you have to provide inventory and whatnot. It depends on what the banks are requiring. And then obviously certain taxes will have to be paid and you have to show proof of those taxes as well. So I wanted to share this experience to give people insight in knowing that you will need somebody on the ground to support you in this, whether you outsource that or you have somebody already that can help you handle it. You just need to know that it is very administrative. So make sure if you are pointing it to someone who is on the ground, that it doesn't take away from too much of their time because it is labor intensive. Operating the account is labor intensive. Okay. Now, action plan to operate your bank account in China. Open communication with your bank. I can't emphasize this more. And whether you have it or whether your right-hand person in China has it, it's up to you. My right-hand person in China has that communication, but I also know the number to dial if I ever need something. All right. So make sure you are open to that communication and you develop it from day one. How do you develop it from day one? It's by doing those introduction meetings that will instigate the communication. All right, make sure you have that effort put in to have those Zoom calls with the banks to understand their service level, what is their communication level, and what services, explaining what services you actually need from them. When you do those introductory calls, be open. Okay, don't hide anything. There's no point in hiding something. Okay, explain what you're doing in China, what the bank is going to be used for, etc. Discuss how many accounts you're going to need. What are the functions of those accounts? What services will you require from them? Do you need a loan? Do you need debit cards? What will you need? Okay. And don't forget, I mean, this is basically the agenda I've created for most of my clients. You know, what documents are required, not only for the bank account opening, but for the operating of the accounts. Is the original legal rep passport going to be needed, not needed for the account opening, but also for operational transactions? What's the online platform looking like? Could they show you a demo of it? Can notifications be received? So this is a critical point that I want to highlight that's also new now. As part of increasing their protective measures, their security measures, when you are opening up new accounts in China, it is required actually to submit 2 Chinese mobile numbers. Because and this is not happening on old accounts. So this doesn't happen on my account. This doesn't happen on my clients' old accounts. This is happening on new accounts. Is that when you do an online payment, you will, I can show you my key token, 1 second. Just so you can visualize it. This is my key token for Icbc. And basically you put this as a USB into your computer. And that is what authorizes payments. But prior to being able to click on that now, you need to receive an SMS code that you need to input on the online platform system to then give the authorization to this key token. They'll be synced. So this obviously offers dilemmas because we've actually done the research. You cannot get a Chinese, or my team cannot get you a Chinese mobile number because apparently it's only 1 mobile number per individual, which is a bit of a nightmare. We have clients that are buying SIM cards, Chinese SIM cards through Amazon to get a Chinese number. They're sort of like prepaid SIM cards. As long as you've got enough money on there to receive your SMSs, that should actually work, okay? So what we are offering clients who can't get SIM cards is the fact that my team, 2 people from my team will receive the SMSs from the bank. There's nothing with the bank in terms of how many people can receive SMSs. And what we require is that our client on WeChat, when they're doing a transfer, tells us so that we can send the SMS immediately and they can make the payment directly on the online platform. Again, it's all about communication and synchronization and having the idea of the time zone. If you have the ability to get your own SIM card and get the SMSs and read those SMSs, then by all means do that, so that you have the flexibility of doing transfers at any point in the day from abroad. You have to understand bank signatories, who is going to have access to the accounts, who is going to be authorized to use the accounts. What options do you have there? And then for outbound payments, what is the document and payment flow? Again, it's always good to be proactive and get document lists from the banks ahead of time so you can prep, be proactive, and if they ask for more, it's not going to be too time consuming. That's the end of today's presentation. We've hit the hour mark. I'm going to see if any questions have popped in. Okay, there are questions that have popped in. Okay, so Cloud has said, how do you get money in and out of China? Cloud, are you asking from an individual perspective or from a corporate perspective? I think from a corporate perspective, I've explained that. Are you asking from an individual's perspective? Maybe you can just let me know. Both. Okay, well, from a corporate perspective, you've got a transaction, you've got a service agreement, you've got an invoice. It does not matter at all what the value is. So you were mentioning in your message that you've heard that there is a cap of 30,000. Well, you're saying 30,000 per person? That's for individual then. In terms of corporate, there's no cap. It's based on your transactional business, right? So you've got an invoice, you've got a service agreement, or you've got a trade transaction, you've got a contract, you've got a purchase order or sales order. You take those documents to the bank and money flows in and out. Okay, like I said, on Monday's presentation, I went through the whole procedure document list, what you have to take to the tax bureau bank for the outbound payments. But in terms of from a corporate perspective, it's all, I hope that's all clear. From an individual's perspective, to get money in from abroad, almost impossible. So I'll give you an example here. We have a client who has been fully registered and has had an urgent situation to hire an individual, a mainland Chinese individual. The issue is the bank accounts are not opened yet, but salary needs to be paid because the guy's like, I'm not going to work for you for free. If it's going to take 3 months to open the account, like, what do you want? What do you expect from me? So in this situation, the UK has actually transferred the net salary to the individual from abroad. And each time that money has arrived at his account, he has had to show his employment contract. He has had to show a letter from the UK, original letter from the UK that's been chopped and signed by the UK saying this is pertaining to his salary. And then a letter from the Shanghai company stating that the bank accounts are still in process with XYZ Bank. His bank is actually getting really fed up by processing. It's been now 3 months by processing these payments, that they have actually threatened to stop releasing the payments into his account if the bank accounts aren't open soon. And there's no cap. So there's no 30,000 or anything like that because it's based on his employment contract. Okay. But otherwise, if you were as an individual, if you are an individual sitting in China doing freelance work for an overseas company and you're expecting to get paid, very, very difficult to get that money in. I would almost say impossible, because even with the supporting documentation, the bank will say, why don't you have a company in China to do these types of transactions? So with inbound, I cannot tell you anything. It's going to depend on the bank, but very, very difficult. For outbound, if you are a foreigner in China and you're looking to transfer funds from your Chinese account to your overseas account, you need to show your individual income tax return that has been declared and filed, employment contract, and in theory, because the money that's sitting there has already been taxed and the tax has been declared, you should be able to transfer any amount of funds out. But just to transfer funds out just like that doesn't usually work. You need to show supporting documentation around it. So I hope that's, I've explained, Cloud, I hope I've been able to explain that for you. When you say it's so difficult, yes, it is difficult. Yeah, I mean, this is all labor intensive stuff. This is not easy. You have to abide by the bank's regulations, and you've just got to understand why they're doing that. The bank does not want to get, banks in China do not want to get caught up in a situation where they are transferring black money or accepting black money into the country. So that is why they're asking for all of that supporting documentation to cover themselves in case of a PR disaster countrywide. The last thing they need is any comment from foreigners saying the banks are corrupt and the banks are dealing with black money issues and whatnot. So this is what they've done to protect themselves, to make sure that any money in, out is being completely, is real, basically. So I hope that explains the reason why they're doing it. It doesn't make it much better, obviously, because it is super intensive, right? So I want to thank everyone for joining me on this webinar series. I appreciate it a lot. If you want to work with me, again, a lot of this series we were talking about actually our implementation and growth services, which is a variety of different things. If you're interested to learn more about what we do, or you want to have a one-to-one discussion, you can book a strategy session with me. I can just quickly, let me move this over, quickly put that into the chat box so everybody's got it. Hold on. There we go. So you've got my contact details there. And just remember, all of the webinars from today's series are up on our YouTube. The four from the previous 4 days are already up on our YouTube channel, and today's will be going up in a couple of hours as well, so you'll be able to do a complete review. As a follow-up, I haven't set it up yet because of time, but in October, we are going to be doing a webinar series on procurement in China. And we've got a couple of guest speakers that will be coming on, because procurement is not really talked about much. We always talk about sales in China, but we will be talking about procurement and merchandising in China. In November, we've got our webinar series, which is all about year-end compliance. And I will have a guest speaker on there who's going to be talking about also insurances in China, which lately has been a hot topic. And then in December, I'm going to be doing a challenge for companies that are looking to establish their businesses in 2022. I will actually be doing a 14-day quarantine in Hong Kong in December to finally see my parents after 2.5 years. And so I've decided to create this challenge to occupy my time in that 14 days. So we are calling it the quarantine challenge, but it is to get you guys ready if you're looking to set up your businesses in China in 2022, to get your everything set up for you prior to starting that implementation. So stay tuned for all of these things that are popping up in the next 3 months. And last but not least, happy national holidays. Today is the 1st of October. It is the golden holiday. It's the golden week in China. My team is off. And I would like to wish all of you a great national holiday period. If you are in China, enjoy your holidays, take a great rest, and see you on the 8th of October. Again, thank you all for joining me. Take care and goodbye.